Hello, this is Soundout here. Welcome back to another Soundout review. Today we'll be taking a look at something different, something I've never reviewed on this channel before. Today we'll be taking a look at a Marvel Legends figure. And not just one, but a whole wave, as this is Spider-Man week. With the recent release of the Marvel Legends Infinite Series Spider-Man figures, and me being a fan of Spider-Man, I wanted the entire wave, and now that I have them all, we'll be taking a look at each figure over the next 7 days. So without further ado, we're going to start with number 1 in the series, the Spawn of Symbiotes. So, we take a look at the packaging. Now, I've never reviewed a Marvel Legends figure. I've never collected a full wave of Marvel Legends recently. And I thought, hey, new Spider-Man movies coming out, and, why not review them? Also, being a fan of Spider-Man, mostly of the TV shows and movies more than any of the comics, because I barely read the comics. I love the 90s Spider-Man cartoon the most. And so, I do like Spider-Man and his cast of characters. And so I decided, hey, this wave is pretty cool. Now, the unfortunate part of this wave is that 2 of the 6 figures are, stupid hard to find. The first one being the Spawn of Symbiotes, which comes in 2 different variations, and then the Skyline Sirens, which we'll cover in a later video. Well, what I want to do is take a look at each of these figures, quick look at the packaging. I'll go over it in more detail here than I will later on. And I want to take a look at the Green Goblin Build-A-Figure when all is said and done. So, 7 videos to cover this wave. Now, my knowledge of Spider-Man, like I said, of the comics is very limited. What I do know is a lot of the characters and what this Marvel Encyclopedia Spider-Man book can provide, which is really handy for these things. For example, today we'll be taking a look at Toxin. Now, Toxin is, of course, a symbiote created character. He was originally Patrick Patty Mulligan and was a police officer before being taken over by a symbiote. He is an ally of Spider-Man and Black Cat, and first appeared in Venom vs. Carnage #1. Now, this book is a little out of date. It's from 2006, so things may have happened, but, the symbiote that he came from was spawned from Carnage, I believe, and was the 1000th symbiote of their line. So Toxin here is pretty cool, and I don't believe he's gotten a Marvel Legends figure before, but I could be wrong. I don't know much about this toy line, admittedly. But, that being said, here we are. Now, the packaging is really nice for these. I like this better than the card back. Reminds me of the new 6-inch Star Wars figures in that way. But you can see there he's got the Build-A-Figure piece for Ultimate Green Goblin, Toxin displayed there. He's got the comic logo here for Spider-Man, the logo there. A very comic-styled Spider-Man image on both sides. It's flipped on, it's the same image, flipped. And it says Spawn of Symbiotes, as this is available as 2 different figures, Toxin or Carnage. Now, the Carnage figure looks fantastic. The unfortunate thing is that he's going for twice retail on Amazon, while Toxin was a little bit easier to find. Now, I did not buy this from Amazon, I bought it from Walmart. I got really lucky, and so I took what I could get to finish Green Goblin. You see Spawn of Symbiotes. Destruction and Mayhem have a new home, living in the body of the demented Eddie Brock, while the vicious Toxin out-savage the chaos-causing Carnage. So yeah, lots of cool stuff there. Like I said, my book of information is a little out of date, but Toxin is cool, and I do have a 6-inch Carnage already, so there is that. They do share a few pieces, which is why they're variants of each other. But you can see here on the bottom, the rest of the series. You have the Build-A-Figure Ultimate Green Goblin, you got the Spawn of Symbiotes, Marvel's Electro, the Amazing Spider-Man, Skyline Sirens, Deadliest Foes, and Superior Spider-Man. So overall, really cool packaging. We won't be covering it in depth like I normally cover packaging for things, mostly because it's the same for almost every figure. So without further ado, let's take a look at Toxin. Alright, so here we got Toxin. Now, Toxin is actually a pretty cool figure. I'm a little bit surprised. He is kind of bland in design by nature. I do like how there is some variation to the color. Um, you know, you have different shades of red, which really works to break it up as opposed to being just, here's a base figure that's painted and has a new head. Um, Overall, the paint scheme is really nice on him. I'm actually quite impressed, being that Hasbro has sometimes not done so well with paint apps on things. But the retail price for Marvel Legends is now $19.99, so there's good that that money is going into more paint apps. That being said, his waist down, he's kind of boring and bland. He is really stocky, though. He is a thick figure. He's not just a thin guy, which is nice. He also has this symbiote kind of effect piece thing that plugs into his back. The problem is it doesn't plug in very well, and the slightest tap, it just starts loosening. And then it's just like, yeah, he's got this stuff just kind of flailing around back here. When you get in there with the first time, it stays moderately okay. But let's talk about this head sculpt. This head sculpt is fantastic. It is terrifying. It has all his awkwardly shaped teeth and the design around his eyes. I was actually really impressed at how none of the colors have bled into each other here, from what I can see, which is really cool. And the whole figure does have a glossy look to him over the red, which just gives the figure more depth. Now, he does share a lot of parts with Carnage, but not owning that figure, I don't really know the differences to point out. I'm going to pull this off for this right now. But overall, a nice-looking figure. And he's greatly articulated. Being used to collecting DC Universe Classics, I love seeing this much articulation in superhero figures. He's got a ball-jointed neck. It's kind of restricted because of how big his head is. But he does have a forward and back neck pivot, which is really nice for getting all kinds of cool poses. You got outward shoulder movement, 360-degree shoulder movement. You got a bicep swivel. You got double-jointed elbows, which work very well. You've got wrist swivel. You got wrist pivot, wrist bend, so you can get kind of more slashing poses out of them. You got ab crunch that goes forward and ratchets backward, which is really nice, but there is lack of paint when you go into the clicky section, so it's best to kind of keep it in that area. He's got a waist swivel. He's got outward leg movement, and a full universal hip, but it doesn't go back at all. His butt kind of gets in the way of that, unfortunately. Thigh swivel, double joint knee, works very well. He's got a boot rotation, even though he doesn't have a boot. It's supposed to be his skin. And he's got ankle pivot and an ankle tilt. That is on that cool Hasbro ball socket joint that reminds me a lot of Kamen Rider figurized kits and Revoltex. So really cool overall. I'm impressed with the articulation. Again, being used to Mattel's minimalistic DC articulation, it's nice to see that Hasbro does step it up with their Marvel figures. And so when you get to characters later on in the wave, there's one in particular that I know nothing about. It still makes a really cool, highly articulated action figure. And you can get Toxin all set up here, and he looks pretty menacing. Definitely those claws, the sculpt on the hands are really nice, and I think the claw look is just fantastic. And overall, I think the figure just looks great if he does have a little bit of a balance issue. But yeah, overall looks really nice. I'm actually pretty impressed. When it came down to it, this was the last figure I needed to complete the set. And when I found Toxin instead of Carnage, I wasn't disappointed. I actually kind of wanted Toxin more since I already owned a Carnage. But I didn't really care at that point because the majority of the reason for getting this figure and hunting him down so much was to complete the Green Goblin. But that being said, I am not displeased that I got Toxin as opposed to what has been seen as the overwhelmingly amazing Carnage. That I honestly think this is a more interesting figure because it is a new character that I don't own a figure of. And honestly, it's pretty good. If you do end up finding the Carnage variant of this figure, it's going to be very similar, as from what I can tell from the packaging art and some pictures online, the base bodies are mostly the same. They just had different modifications. But speaking of that Build-A-Figure piece, you get the head of Ultimate Green Goblin here, and you get the backfire piece. That's what I'm calling it. So you do get two pieces here, which is substantial, and it is a large figure, so you're getting a smaller piece. But I do have to laugh how it comes with an instruction sheet, just in case you don't know how anatomy works and where limbs go. But it does give you a nice breakdown of what figure comes with what piece. So overall, really cool, and a nice start to the Marvel Legends Infinite Series Spider-Man wave. Overall, I'm quite impressed with Toxin and would highly recommend him. The only issue being he is going for more than retail on Amazon, about $10 more or so. But he is, I have seen him at retail, while I have not seen Carnage at retail, so he's definitely the easier of the two variants to find if you're wanting to complete the Green Goblin. But overall, I'd highly recommend the figure, and I think he's really cool. So anyways, stay tuned as Spider-Man Week continues all week. And tomorrow we'll be taking a look at the next figure in the series, Marvel's Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Be sure to check out HeroTaku.com for all your Marvel Comics news and more. Discuss Spider-Man and Marvel Comics on the HeroTaku forums at HeroTaku.com/forums. And check out Ragio Nihon for all your Japanese music and podcast needs. Until next time, saying goodbye.